Temp check. What kind of summer are we having this year? A family road trip summer? A beach bum summer? Or a wake me up when the sun sets summer? With Instacart, choose your own adventure and skip the shopping side quests. Where available, you can get ice cream delivered to your hotel, sunscreen to the pool, or cold brew to your bed. Well, door, in as fast as 30 minutes. Wherever you find yourself this summer, you can get the goods. Download Instacart for free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum $10 per order. Excludes restaurants. Additional terms and fees apply.
And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
In each episode, our special guest brings with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, our guest is Emmett Nahil, a writer, narrative designer, game developer, and literary jack of all trades living in a haunted town north of Boston, Massachusetts. Cannot wait to hear more about that.
Yeah,
He's interested in intersectional analysis, diverse representations for other queer Middle Easterners, and bringing more nuanced work to genre fiction. He has been known to favor horror, along with sci-fi, fantasy, and some really weird speculative literature, so we're obviously very excited to have him here. And he is the writer of his debut graphic novel, Let Me Out. Welcome to the show, Emmett!
Hi, guys. Thanks so much. It's good to be here.
It's good to have you here. I honestly have been wanting to talk with you ever since the game that you developed or narratively designed. Is that the appropriate term? Love Shore came out earlier this year. But we're here to talk about Let Me Out. So what is this comic book or this graphic novel about?
So, yeah, first of all, you got it right. The narrative design is the word for it. I'm just but one of a team, so I helped with the narrative along with my co-founder. But yeah, my debut graphic novel with illustrator George Williams, who's, co-creator, co-everything on that project, is coming out early this October. Very exciting. And it's sort of a queer take on the Satanic Panic in the late 70s, early 80s. Yeah, just that's the most succinct way I can think of describing it, pretty much.
Yeah, and I love I love the graphic novel so much, and I love hearing how writers and artists come together to create this vision. So I know you said that, you and George were co-everything with this, but you're primarily the writer, and he was primarily the artist, correct? Mm-hmm. I mean, yes. I guess, but if we want to put people in the boxes, but I'm curious, who came to who with the idea first, and kind of where did this idea come from?
Yeah, co-everything is a bit of a stretch. I think he has a bit more talent with the art than I do. It's more so because I really hate it when comic writers try and make it like every part of the intellectual creation of the comic was their work, and the artist just was the illustrator, and so that's why I say that, to combat that kind of idea. But I did the idea sort of came about in late 2019, early 2020. I was working food service in New York City, and Oof. It was a new location at that particular cafe I was working at, and so I had a lot of downtime. I'd been writing professionally for a few years and just had always loved and was interested in comics as well as horror generally, and so I was also at the same time watching a lot of sort of like 80s nostalgic content that had started to come out around that time. Mm-hmm. And so I was thinking about what I didn't like about that stuff. And in that, I found myself really chafing against the idea that like the 80s was this super like rosy nostalgic time. And everyone clearly wants to go back in history and, just live the dream. And obviously as queer trans person of color, that's not exactly correct. But I also wanted to incorporate some of the stuff I do love, which is the horror from that period, and like some of the weird demonic or possession horror that came out around that time too. And so that's why I was sort of started circling around the idea of For Let Me Out. I put out a call on Twitter, rest in peace. And
seriously.
And George ended up reaching out, which was fantastic because I already loved his work.
Cool.
And we took it from there, basically.
That's so cool. Twitter, bringing us all together at one time at least it was, long ago.
When it's not driving us apart, you know?
Yeah, seriously. So I'm curious about this because you talked about the nostalgia of the 80s, and as someone that lived through the 80s and into now, and I remember growing up, I was born 1981, so the start of my life was in the 80s, and then you start to see like the way once you're older and you look back and you see how the 80s, a lot of it was either nostalgia or anti-nostalgia of like the 50s, and then we see like with the Stranger Things and like it and all of the like 80s kind of nostalgias you were talking about is starting to come back into focus for the 80s, and we're looking back at that with like rose-colored glasses. It is frustrating sometimes to see like, I think, queer erasure in some way, because like it wasn't a great time for queer people in particular. And so I'm curious about how like you kind of tussled with that for Let Me Out.
I mean, I'm to be straightforward, I am a young millennial. I was born in 95, so I wasn't there. I don't know. But like, I do love history. I have a long-standing love for history and just for, I don't know, digesting like history in general as sort of a living environment that you can engage with through fiction. And so I took a lot of that depiction kind of seriously, and I take that depiction pretty seriously in other forms of media. And so I ended up really just like thinking about the period and thinking about like what was interesting about that time in terms of like all the political stuff that was going on at that time, as well as like the queer history that we do know was present and just doesn't get talked about very much, right. At least in like cis straight circles, I guess. And so I just wanted to bring that to the forefront in a genre context, I guess.
Oh,
yeah. So it was really kind of cool reading this because it seems like every single of the main characters are queer. Is that fair? Yeah, right. Yes. Yeah. So like I love seeing that, and I also it feels oddly relevant now because we are starting to hear again the idea of like Satan is, there's this fear on the right-wing side that all liberals are Satanists and all this kind of stuff is going down. And so it feels very relevant while also kind of capturing a time frame, particularly going into like the height of Satanic Panic in like the late 70s, early 80s. And so I think it's fascinating to see. I like that.
Thanks.
And also so terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah, because we've talked about this recently, like with religious horror seeing kind of a spike with like The Nun and the Conjuring stuff, and just seeing this spike and wanting to see these like good versus evil, clean narratives. It is kind of terrifying to feel like we're living through a new kind of satanic panic, which is
it's gross. But to say the least, it's gross. But yeah, that's a big like thought that has come up and was coming up when I was writing it, even before the recent most public awful DeSantis bullshit. Not to bring like immediate politics into an otherwise fun conversation, but like it's true, like the bullshit is still going on, and I don't like that it's become more and more relevant to my comic, but it's here now, so
right.
I guess we're dealing with it. Yeah.
Jesus. So I was just going into just like how to make a comic. And this is your first comic, correct? So like what, as a writer, as a creator, what was the biggest challenge for you in creating this and kind of working at a new medium?
Yeah, it was my first full-length graphic novel, but not my first like comic script I've ever written, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I go about as somebody who does work in multiple mediums, I try and attack each medium with like a lot of seriousness, I guess is what I would say. Because I like and I'm a consumer of a lot of different like movies, books, and comics and stuff. But I never want to take for granted that, like, oh, I've written a book, so I can write a comic script. I never want to take that for granted.
Yeah.
And so I went about just really picking apart some of the comics that I loved. I went about talking to George specifically about how he would like the script framed, like what would be easiest for him in terms of like notation, what kind of references would you like, and really just looking at a lot of peers' like free resources that have been put online. Cool. I believe there's like a bunch of, comic book template for like script templates floating around online, and all that kind of stuff is very useful if you're just starting out in terms of framing it and making sure that you have everything on the page. Yeah.
So wait, so what are some of your favorite comics, especially that were inspiration for Let Me Out?
Yeah. I think my one biggest inspiration, I think that is, I mean, he's pretty well known now, but Cullen Bunn is huge in like my personal pantheon of like comic writers and creators who I look up to. His work, Harrow County, is
God,
okay.
Yes. Him and Tyler Cook are like,
I'm
yes,
not familiar.
yeah.
I'm really bad with names, but the moment you said her, I was like, okay, I have read that one.
Yeah, and it seems like kind of a weird comparison for Let Me Out, but I think the way that he creates character-focused stories in like small towns and within like these really dark worlds is really beautiful and really cool. And I'm obsessed with what he does generally. I mean, also things like Preacher is great in terms of like humor and comedy in these dark settings. It's pretty obvious for anyone of my age and generation, but Mike Mignola and Hellboy is like a foundational tenet for me. Yeah.
I love that you didn't name any superheroes. That is not any shade to superhero comics, because they are like, they're huge. I think there's some really awesome work being done by artists and writers in the superhero comic space. That is absolutely not to disparage that medium at all, because again, like it's so popular for a reason, but it's just refreshing to hear other kinds of graphic novels out there. So I think expanding people's ideas of what comics and graphic novels are, because I think so often people just think superheroes when really there's so much more going on in such an incredible medium of telling. And it's like for horror especially, such cool stuff going on with horror comics. So yeah. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to offend anyone before who's a superhero fan. Superhero comics are very important too. I apologize. That came off as harsh.
No, you're right. And I think that's what people who aren't in the industry tend to think of when they do think of comics. And so it's not out of left field. I will say, though, that the ethos of Magneto as a character infuses everything I do. So it's...
And that's the thing, that's why I backtrack, because there are fucking incredible comics. Like, again, X-Men, incredible characters. Like, so many incredible characters. I fucking love Batman and all the iterations of Batman. So, like, I don't mean to be a hater, because there are incredible characters. But, anyway... Magneto is rad as hell.
It just kind of sucks when people say comic and they immediately associate it with superheroes, because like I remember when because I own a couple X-Men comics, but like when I was first getting into comic collecting as a young kid, it was the Predator comics, it was Aliens, it was like all of these niche comics that like no one knew existed, because everyone was like Superman, Batman, X-Men, and that kind of stuff. So I do love that we are in a time now where there's so many different like good horror comics out there, and that it's making like a name for itself. I think that's great.
I totally agree. The one like bridge that I often recommend to horror fans who want to get into comics, or maybe get into like more superhero focused comics but aren't really sure where to start, is Alan Moore's Swamp Thing run. That's like, I'm looking at the box set that I have sitting over on my bookshelf, but it's one of my favorite, I guess, like superhero comics that is really a horror comic.
It's so good. Everyone should read it. Alan Moore, as much of a fucking weirdo as he is, he's really good.
He's good at what he does.
Good at what he does. Weird dude, but you know what? Whatever. He deserves to be left alone in his swamp as the weird wizard that he is. But I want to hear also more about the films that inspired this, and like the horror inspiration, and how that, like all the movies and that kind of you thought of while writing this.
Yeah. I thinking about like sort of more like, I guess, like non-modern or like vintage inspirations for it. Carrie is also a huge shadow over this comic. Like the high school revenge story is like so classic and has been done in like so many different ways. But like De Palma's Carrie is like pretty much for me one of the peaks. Just generally like the idea of like Amityville Horror 2 coming out around that same time frame where I set the comic to, I was thinking a lot about that, and just the idea of an infestation or like these people who are like, we're so ready to believe in like demons and like in the demonic. That was sort of an interesting one for me too. More contemporaneously, I guess, for movies that were inspirational to me was The Ranger. I'm forgetting the director.
Oh, Jen Wexler?
Yes. That's the name. Yeah.
So happy that gets a shout. I love that movie. She's cool as hell.
It's such a cool movie.
She's cool as hell.
Yeah. And like the way that movie framed like its, you know, chase sequences and such was really inspirational, and like especially the last third of the comic for me too, for sure.
Hell yeah. That's so cool.
Yeah. I ended up pointing out for colors and sort of for visual effects, Mandy is a huge one.
Okay.
Yeah. The sort of bold color palettes. Yeah. That, Lord Jesus. That's always in my brain and in how I think about like really stunningly beautiful and kind of like hallucinatory uses of color. Yeah.
Panis
That definitely describes that movie.
So good at that too. God, he's so weird, and I mean that with love. I love his like weird acid trip movies, basically, which Mandy really is.
It really is. So can you take us back to the beginning? How did you get introduced to horror?
So I am not one of those people who's like, my parents were super into horror. Like I was watching it since I was in the cradle, you know, like, yeah, my parents are very not into horror as a genre, and so it's tricky to find movies to recommend to them sometimes. But I always...
I've given up recommending it to my parents who are the same, so I get it.
Yeah.
My mom's like, you like horror, what should I watch? I'm like, I don't think you want my recommendation.
You don't want one of my recommendations.
I don't want to do that, because I watched Hereditary with her, and that was a nightmare. So yeah, no, none of that. But anyway, Emmett, back to you.
No, I didn't really have like a strong like early love of horror until I really got into my teens, which plays into the topic of our discussion today later on. But I remember watching my father's really into 50s sort of like samurai movies,
okay,
and stuff like that, and all of those movies really focused on the battle scenes and the gore, and I was always really interested in that, and so I think I can kind of trace it back to that a little bit. But I ended up really being into speculative fiction generally, and science fiction, fantasy first, and then from there, as I sort of got into my teens, I started kind of getting a little bit bored with sword and sorcery fantasy and the like Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter of it all as a kid. And so I started branching out there into different types of movies, different types of books, and finding horror as a place that I was constantly being surprised about, like what direction stories would go, I guess. So that's sort of how I ended up getting into it.
Anytime someone mentions fantasy, I just got to ask, what was your entry point into fantasies? I was not as much anymore, although I still am in some degrees a huge fantasy fan. So what was kind of your...
I have played all of my time on Baldur's Gate 3. Shut the fuck
Listen.
up. Call your ass out in an interview.
Is it Asterion? Is it him? It
is Asterion. Absolutely.
And I have become attracted to him via Terry. I'm not playing the game. By osmosis, I have absorbed a sexual attraction for the video game vampire.
Listen, you haven't lived until you've gone to a bordello and had a fivesome with Asterion, Halsin, and a pair of drow twins. Like, you haven't lived.
Terry's living the goddamn life right now.
Finally, Baldur's Gate on the pod. Truly, just like all of the game studio has been bearing witness to my co-founder's obsession with Baldur's Gate specifically. So it's a big topic of conversation. But otherwise, like for fantasy, personally, for me, like when I was a kid, really, it was unfortunately Harry Potter at first. It's like
mine too. I mean,
it's the age, you know. I'm 28.
I was born in 93, so we are very close in the age. So we had very similar, like, that was what we read. Like, that was the easy access.
Yeah. It's I definitely was also into Aragon as a kid.
Okay.
Yeah. That was one of my interests. Just was really into steampunk as a kid too, like more urban fantasy as well. Yeah, all that stuff that was big in that era. Yeah, for sure.
Did you watch it? Were you a big like anime kid too?
Touch and go, really. If I had to pick one, I would say I was more into like Death Note and Bleach. Those were the two that that really got me.
Cool, sweet.
Yeah, truly. Yeah.
Wait, so okay. Then what book kind of, like, what were you reading that got you into horror? Before we jump into the movies, I'm curious.
Honestly, I did the thing that everyone did, which is, you know, pick up Stephen King. Yeah. Because I didn't have a ton of access to other interesting horror books around me at the time. Yeah. Like, this was really, for me, where I lived in like a suburb of Boston, right? Like there were some inklings of like that sort of big popular acceptance of like indie horror going on in like Barnes and Noble and stuff, but like not a lot, like at least none that were obvious to me as like a teen. And so I picked up Misery, and it's still my favorite King book, like today.
It's a good one.
What a good entry point for you. That was your first like entry point to King then, was Misery?
Yeah, because I heard people saying it was really fucked up, and I was like, oh, I'm a teen, I'll totally read something fucked up. That and creepypasta online, to be honest. Like
again, same. It's so funny because Terry and I have a decent age gap, so like I grew up reading like fucked up things on Reddit, and like before even Reddit, like creepypastas and all that shit. And so it's funny because Terry's always like, I did not experience that, but like the internet definitely was a big place with all this like creepy ass things you'd find.
Yeah, like the lore
early
of it all.
YouTube.
Yes,
early YouTube was a dangerous place.
Totally.
It was, yes, absolutely.
And then, so what was the first, do you remember the first horror movie you ever saw?
The absolute first? Oh, God. I think I remember catching bits of, I believe it was Halloween 2 on TV. Like, I really think it might have been that.
Love the specificity.
Love that. I'm like, it wasn't Halloween 1. I think it was 2. The first one I saw in its entirety was the first Nightmare on Elm Street. I do recall that.
Okay, cool.
And that was,
how old were you?
Oh, God. I think I was probably about like 11, maybe.
Okay.
Old enough to like go over to someone else's house and someone else have picked up the movie, you know.
Yeah. See, but I still love that when like you were 11, people were still showing Nightmare on Elm Street at slumber parties. You know what I mean? Like, these movies have such an impact, and they're still at slumber parties. And I love that.
Yeah. I
was showing my friends Peeping Tom, which was an interesting choice of mine that I made once. But anyway.
Iconic, honestly. Iconic.
I've actually never seen Peeping Tom.
It's good. It's very good. Love it. But so, yeah. So obviously Let Me Out is, like, demonic, possession, revenge, horror. But do you have any subgenres that you really gravitate towards in the horror genre? Or are you kind of like anything and everything?
For sure. I mean, I think anything vaguely historical I'm interested in. That's cool. Anything Robert Eggers does is kind of like up my alley.
Hell yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But I like almost every other trans horror writer I've ever met. Love body horror. It's one of my favorite things. It's so juicy. It's so good, both literally and figuratively.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah. My debut graphic novel, is coming out from Tenebris Press in 2024 in like summer, and that has a lot to do with nautical horror too. So it's sort of a nautical queer body horror. Yes.
Whoa, okay, hold on. You just said like that was like Terry. You activated Terry because those are like all of his favorite things. Like you have activated him. Well, now we have to. Can we talk about that really quick about your novels?
Please. Yeah, absolutely.
Because now I'm like, well, we now we have to know.
Yeah. I guess the soft pitch for it currently, and again, it's I believe summer 2024 is when it's coming out. But it follows. It's in a sort of second world fantasy, but inspired by sort of whaling voyages in the 1800s. So it follows working class sailor who is gifted prophetic visions. On this ship, they are near mutiny, and they pull up the body of a whale, and there is a eldritch man inside the body of the whale. And the protagonist ends up forming a relationship with the man from the belly. And what happens? You won't like it, but it sure is spooky.
I want this in my eyes right now.
I want that. What happens? You won't like it. Bert sure is spooky. I want that on a t-shirt. I want that like cross-stitched and on my wall. Like that just like sums up everything. That sounds... What's the title?
From the Belly is the title of the book. Coming out 2024 from Tenebris Press.
Tenebris Press rules, by the way, everybody.
Yes.
So
I do.
Oh my god, and they fall in love and bad things happen. It's everything we want. Terry and I love weird, fucked up horror romances. Not to call it a romance, but like when all the set. Ooh.
Yeah. It's I'm glad you're into it. I like it a lot. I think it's good.
Good, I'm glad that you do. And it's a full-length novel?
Yes, it's under 300 pages.
Cool.
No, 320? Oh god. It's around that mark, but not a huge doorstopper, but not a novella. It's a full novel. Mm-hmm.
Hell yeah! I cannot wait.
All right, well, that is so fucking cool. So you like aquatic horror? Is that something that you're gravitate to?
Yes, yeah. So the reference of it to a spooky town north of Boston is that I live very close to Salem, Massachusetts. So
okay,
yeah, that's
you're
that.
Perfect, like nautical, spooky, everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like to live the life, walk the walk.
I was gonna say, really, I love that. All you need is like a little like cute, like an Irish fishing sweater and a little beanie and like a corncob pipe, and you're like, I am.
Fuck with me, you won't.
Embroider that on the beanie that you wear when you fish. Fuck with me, you won't. You don't know what I've seen in the ocean. Anyway.
But I have to ask because I don't want to forget. Haunted town north of Boston, Massachusetts.
Is it Salem, or is it like, what town is it? Are you referring to Salem when you say that, or is it a different haunted town?
No, I am in Marblehead, which is also haunted, but not as like notoriously haunted as Salem. I just like to say that because giving out my home address, why do you need to know? Like
I mean, fair. That's fair.
Marblehead, Massachusetts. So it's a peninsula. It's very rocky. We get lots of fun ocean storms and stuff like that. So that's nice.
You get the fog. You get the nice gray, scary ocean storms.
That sounds perfect. And
you got ghosts, it sounds like.
Yeah, for sure.
Have you seen ghosts? Do you think you've seen ghosts?
So I haven't visually seen ghosts, but I will tell you a story.
I love it.
I live on the third floor of a condo, next to a church, by the way, which is kind of funny. But I am on the third floor, and so in the house, it's like the roof of the house. There's like beams. It's very steeply angled. So I also have sort of a loft bed situation where I sleep up very close to the ceiling of the house itself. Mm-hmm. So pretty regularly in this house, I will hear what sound an awful lot like footsteps on the roof of my house. Like walking around, like down the line of the house. So I either have some very, very hefty raccoons, or there's a weird ghost situation going on.
You know what? If they are just pacing the roof, fine. You know what?
Fine.
Stay there. I'm glad.
Don't fall off. It's not about to be my problem, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's your next graphic novel, is the story, or your next book, the story of the ghost that paces on the roof of your condo.
Yeah, it's just up there.
Before we talk about the movie you brought, though, I do want to know, what was the last movie that truly scared you?
Ooh, this is going to be a little bit of an unconventional answer.
Love it.
So I'm sorry in advance. If you're into
Never apologize.
If you're into paranormal documentaries or anything it related to ghost hunters. The Unbinding, the new documentary from Greg and Dana
this
Newkirk.
weekend. That's why I got excited, because I just watched it.
It rips. It rips so hard. It's so good. The Newkirks are so cool. Like
they're becoming a little bit like the Warrens of our day and age, and I'm a little bit worried about that, but like that's whatever. That's neither here nor there. But Terry, they did Hellier, the show that I talked to you about.
Yes, I have not seen it yet, but I did note it because I saw that it was coming out on VOD, and I was like, that sounds interesting, and I clicked on it, and it said it was from Helliers, and I was like, ooh, I know Mary Beth talked about it. I've never seen it, but
yeah,
it's good. It's weird. It's spooky. And what I like about them is they do kind of say, like, we might have done something really cool, but you know, they don't try to push it. It's not as cheesy as other documentaries. Like, we saw ghosts. They're more just like, something really fucking weird happened, and we're not totally sure what it was. So I do appreciate they're a little bit more measured in like their experiences, and a little less like, it's a demon, and more like, something fucking weird happened. But there's some really cool stuff that involves like technology, and that just makes my found footage brain go brr. So it was really
it's so cool. Like all of their work is like, my point of view on a lot of paranormal documentaries, just like, even if it's 100% bullshit, I'm having a great time. Like this.
That's me. That's when people are like, do you believe in this stuff? I'm like, I mean, like, I don't know, passively. I just think it's fun, and like, it's kind of just like enjoyable, and I like, you know, maybe ghosts are real. Who am I to say?
Anyway, the Unbinding has some genuinely freaky segments that like made me go like, ah! You know, very, very scary, but nothing super crazy. But I really love that one. That was great. Highly recommend.
Yeah, it's real good, guys, and it just came out like a couple last week.
I'm gonna have to watch it.
So yeah. Okay, so Emmett, now that we have talked about all things your horror history, what movie did you bring with you today for us to discuss?
I brought Insidious, the first one, 2010.
2010 Insidious. For those of you unfamiliar, a family looks to prevent evil spirits from trapping their comatose child in a realm called the Further.
Yeah. So okay, I think we all have like a relationship to this movie, but I am so curious, Emmett. Take us back. How old were you when you saw this? How did you see this? Why is this your Scarred for Life pick? Give us your horror story.
So I was, I believe, about 14 or 15 when I first saw this. I think I was 14, maybe? No, 15. And this was also around the same time that a little movie called Easy A came out, I believe. Both in theaters at the same time. Easy A. You can see where I'm going with this, because I definitely said, I'm going to go see Easy A in the theater. And my parents said, great, fantastic, wonderful, no problem. I did not see Easy A in the theater. I saw Insidious. My lovely friends were like, what the fuck? Absolutely not. And I said, I want to just I'll go sneak in and see that. God bless the Patriot Cinemas on the South Shore. They have a very easy theater to sneak around in. And so I crept out and I wandered into the showing of Insidious, sat my ass down, and was so freaked out for kind of no reason. But, you know, maybe it's a good reason because it's a good movie. I don't know. Like, I was just so freaked out by, like, everything about that movie.
Everything. The vibes in that movie are rancid on purpose, and I love that.
Yes.
But they make you feel like shit. And you were by yourself watching it?
Yeah.
Oh my god, at 14 and you snuck in? Oh my god. Oh, you are brave.
Well, because it's PG-13, and so I thought, how bad could it be?
That's true. That's true. Wait, why did you sneak in then? Why didn't you just buy a ticket for it?
I don't know. I think I decided at the last minute. My friends were like, oh, we're going to go see this one. And I said, yeah, sure, okay. I guess I wasn't into Emma Stone, you know.
You said, I have started liking horror movies, so I'm going to go see Insidious. And wow. So what was it? How did it affect you? Like, was there after effects when you went home? Like, what did that look like after watching the movie?
Yeah, I mean, I think like to this day, I do the dumb thing of like, you check the corners of your room after you watch something scary. My curse is that I wear glasses, obviously. I'm very blind. And so when I wake up in the middle of the night, I can't really see the corners of my room. And so many times, I think I maybe woke up like 5 times that night afterwards trying to go to sleep and just looking up and seeing like the long, thin hand with the spidery fingers and all the classic like night terror stuff that you get. But the main thing is that that shot, the infamous one where Patrick Wilson's sitting in the chair and you see the demon directly behind him, still scares me to this day. As an adult who knows a lot about horror, it's still like, it makes me jump. It like sends chills down my spine. It's like primordial fear now.
Was it that scene in the movie that you remember specifically terrifying you, or what were like some of the scenes that, because like the whole movie is very freaky, I have to say, but like were there specific scenes that you remember just like traumatizing you in the movie theater?
It was definitely that one, because it was one of the first times I experienced a jump scare in a theater, and definitely the first time I experienced a jump scare alone.
Okay.
Like, that was just so, that one shot was so awful, because you aren't really given, up until that point in the movie, you're not really given a lot of architecture to hold on to as to like what exactly is happening.
Yes.
And it's so weird, and the makeup is so uncanny. It's not all red, it's not all black. It's like the weird like eyes with the shapes of the face paint as well. There were definitely other scenes in there and sequences that really freaked me out, but that one is the one that has stuck with me the most.
That's the one
for
that stuck
sure.
with you.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes perfect sense. And so you had also said that you were kind of new to horror in your teens. So what was your like horror history up until that point of seeing that when you were like 14? Had you seen a lot of movies in those intervening like 3 or 4 years where you started to get really into horror, or was this relatively newer?
Not really a ton, honestly. I had seen the first Nightmare on Elm Street. Like I said, I'd caught snippets of Halloween, but like a lot of my horror had been reading stuff online, reading creepypasta, seeing, awful shit on YouTube. Like Marble Hornets, I believe it was, and like early, like dumb stuff like that. Yeah, like all that. Yeah. So it wasn't really, the context of horror movies as official productions wasn't something I was like super intimately familiar with yet, which now is obviously the opposite, like I will see anything I can get my hands on. But I think that experience of being so freaked out by a movie made me want to seek it out more, because that's what we do, I guess.
Yeah. We do.
Yeah.
I don't understand it either. So you watched it and were scared, but then were you all of a sudden like, wait, I want more of that? Like, I'm excited for more.
Yeah, just because to me, it's so rare for like movies, and when you're a teen, everything really affects you more than it would normally. But like as a teen, that's such a specific kind of like shock to experience, I guess, from media. When normally it's like you're watching like comedies, or you're watching like romantic dramas, or whatever it is. Like, it was such a specific thing because no one else in my family was really watching horror, and none of my friends were really into horror like in that same way at the time, and so it seemed really unique. And because I'm a lifelong contrarian, I was like, I like that. That's weird, like I was a weird teen girl, and like I carry her within me all the time.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I love that.
So you snuck in to see this. Did you tell your parents afterwards, or did you? Or
no,
how did,
God, no. No. Absolutely not.
So did you just make up what Easy A was about? Did they ask you or anything?
Yeah, I had no idea what it was. I think like we ended up renting it later on. I was like, oh yeah, this part is great. Mm-hmm. Like,
I just can't wait for you to see this coming.
Yeah, it's just I totally. I don't think I even told them to this day, actually. So if they listen to this, sorry, Mom. But it's fine. Yeah, they definitely did not tell them about the night terror shit afterwards, for sure.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
That is very fair.
So I love this movie, and I saw it for the first time. I didn't see it in theaters. I saw it with my my boyfriend at the time, who was a very bad boyfriend, but was like a long-term boyfriend. And I'm saying that for a reason for a reason. I wanted to watch this movie really bad, but I was like super scared of it because everyone had said how scary it was. And I was like a horror person, but I was like, I knew they were jump scares and I hated jump scares. Like when I was younger, I could watch, like I didn't mind them, but I wanted to watch during the day because I was like, there's too many jump scares. Like I need daytime. Well, this is the first movie I ever audibly screamed at watching a horror movie. Like, this is the first, and I think one of the only horror movies I've ever audibly screamed. And I think it wasn't when I screamed again when the face showed up, but I'm trying to remember which scare it was. I think it was the baby monitor, one of the baby monitor scares. Like that fucks with me. Like that, as a kid who did a lot of babysitting, like my biggest fucking fear was hearing something coming out of that baby monitor. So, and it didn't help that my boyfriend at the time, who is a terrible person, kept trying to make me freak out and like trigger panic. And that was great. He thought it was hysterical, but regardless, I just like, this movie surprised me, especially because when they move, I think when they move houses so quickly, I was like, wait, what the fuck? Like, they don't ever leave the house in these movies. What do you fucking mean they're moving? Like, I think that, and as you mentioned, Emmett, like, that kind of, literally the architecture, like, it destabilizes what you think of a haunted house movie, because it's framed like a haunted house movie. And I loved that because it was so surprising. I was like, I know it's good. I kind of know what to expect. I was like 16 at the time, but I'd seen so many horror movies. I was like, oh, whatever. And then I was like, holy shit. I don't know what's going to happen. They left the house. What the fuck happens next? And it was just like such an awesome experience to be like, this movie really fucking surprised me. And I still love that about this movie and how it does that and how it really does shake up what you think of a haunted house movie. And this is like James Wan, like in the beginning too. Like, is this
pre-Conjuring?
Pre-Conjuring. I can never remember.
This is the reason why he got The Conjuring.
Yes, this is the reason why. Okay, because this also made so much fucking money too at the box office. But
$1.5 million budget, making over $100 million at the box office.
Like, no, of course James Wan was like, you could have everything you want. But I just, like, James Wan really just came out the gate with Saw. He had another movie that didn't do so well, and then, like, Insidious, and then Dead Silence.
Dead Silence.
I love Dead Silence.
Sentence.
I don't care. Dead Silence is good. Justice for Dead Silence. And then he just comes fucking roaring back with Insidious. Holy shit. Like, what? Yeah. God damn. Anyway.
That run is crazy. No.
Like, insane. And that, like, this really was such, like, a big movie when I watched it. Like, it really fucking scared me. Because I was a really scared kid. I had kind of gotten over it. And then this movie, like, really shook me up. I was like, I'm about to go to college, and this shit's, like, making me, like, want to piss my pants kind of shit. Like, it was so, yeah.
Were you screaming in a movie theater, or was this at home?
It was at home. It was at home.
Okay.
It was not in a movie theater. It was at home. So it wasn't as, like, funny, but it was like it was a lot for me because I had never had such a visceral reaction to a horror movie before. So it got me, baby. This movie is scary. This movie still scares me. I don't care. I know every jump scare in this movie, and it still gets me. I don't care. James Wan is an expert with jump scares. I swear to God, this man was just like born knowing how to make the perfect jump scare. I think, you know,
it's true. It's so true.
It's absolutely true. And so I love that this movie like really fucked us all up, because here's the thing. I was Emmett, the person going to see Easy A instead of this movie in the movie theater. So I would have been, at that time when it came out, I guess I would have been 30, and I went to go see Easy A in the movie theater. I was in this kind of PG-13 horror, kind of, you know, stupid mentality at the time. And so I was like, I don't want to go see Insidious. And so I didn't see it in the movie theater. And then I started hearing like everyone saying, oh my God, this is the scariest movie ever. And so I remember, I believe either when it came out on DVD or on, because I'm guessing it would have been DVD. I had just moved into a house. That year, I had just moved into a house by myself. I was living there by myself. I was like, okay, I had like a big TV. I had a like 5.1 surround sound system. Had it all set up, primed to watch this movie. And I remember sitting down, putting it in, going, "This is gonna be fine. I'm not gonna be terrified." And then first being like really impressed with the structure of the movie because it just hits the ground running. And within like the first 12 minutes, we are getting scares. We are getting horrifying moments. As you say, Mary Beth, they're eventually like within the first act leaving the home and going to a completely different home. It is setting up all of the things about a ghost story, and then it is knocking them over and saying, nope, we're going to zigzag while you think we're going straight forward. And so there's all that, and I'm already unsettled. And it's the moment for me, the moment that I will never, ever forget for as long as I live, is the moment when Rose Byrne's character, Renee, is in bed. Her husband has been relegated to the couch downstairs. She wakes up from a nightmare, and then she sees someone walking outside her window.
Oh, God.
Oh, I'm getting...
And this man is just walking back and forth in front of her window. And I'm sitting in my couch going, This isn't right. This is supposed to be ghosts. I'm supposed to see like invisible things and people poltergeisting things off the shelves. There's a fucking man walking outside her window, and he's walking back and forth and back and forth. And then he's walking through the shadows into her fucking room, and I screamed so fucking loud that my cat Shado was sitting on my lap and jumped off of me and running and went hiding for the rest of the night because I literally screamed so fucking loud at that moment. Alone in my house with my poor kitty just like tearing off. Ugh. And that is what I will never forget about this movie is that moment.
God, it's such a, like, if you are not really, really, like, because I've rewatched this movie a few times and like been in the room with people who are like on their phones or whatever, but like that moment and the baby monitor one will always get people back into the movie, like no matter what they're doing. It's wild. And like the solidity of the ghosts is so weird in this movie too. It's so strange, and it calls to mind so much, like, I guess, like, some kinds of, like, Japanese horror, specifically. Yeah. I'm sure that I'm not great with, like, specific names, but, like, that solidity is so particular, and it's so freaky in this movie.
And this is when James Wan, like, this is the movie where James Wan introduced that, because, like, it continues through all of his movies that his ghosts are not, like, apparitions. They're people. Like, they are solid beings, and I love that he gives them such an actual physical, like, physicality in the real world, because it makes it so much scarier. This isn't just like a passing through. Like, this is a thing. It's a person. It's a form. And he starts that here. And like you mentioned, like the eye makeup and how he makes them look even more uncanny with the weird stop motion-y way they kind of smile and like move.
Yeah, the instant smiles. Oof.
And I think he plays with that a little bit in Dead Silence, but he really hits it here. And it continues with The Conjuring and all of that. And he really does. Like, this movie really establishes not only his visual language, but like a visual language for the like that, I think, decades kind of movies, though. I feel like everyone wanted to be Insidious after this and wanted to have that. And it's just so simple and so scary. Like, the scene where the guy jumps through the shadows, I screamed and jumped out of my chair. I was like, this isn't fair. This is breaking all of the rules that I'm used to. And I hate it, but I love it because it's breaking all the rules. And again, it is pretty simple, too. You know what? Like, at first. Yeah. When we get into the more complicated astral projection, it's not as simple. But, like, the setup is pretty simple.
Yeah.
Fucking cool,
It really is. And even last night when I was watching for prep for the podcast, I knew that it was coming. And I knew that he was going to walk this way and then walk back out of the shadows. And I still fucking jumped last night, even though I knew it was coming. Just because, like, it's an incredibly well-timed jump scare that I think the best jump scares are ones that were like, you know it's coming and yet you still jump at it. And that one for me, every single time I've watched it, it still gets me.
Totally. I wonder, like, I wonder if he was, because so much of like the stop motion type stuff, I wonder if it looked like it was filmed backwards, you know? And I wonder if he got that from the most recent, that Dracula adaptation. Oh my God, was it Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, when he's filming Lucy's coming out of the thing, but it's in that backwards filming. And so I wonder if there's a specific source for that, because it's always so good. Like, I love it. It always is so freaky and uncanny, and I just think he deploys it so well here. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
It also kind of reminds me of like the Dark Castle movies of like the early aughts with like House on Haunted Hill and like 13 Ghosts. Like there's that moment where they're like one of the nurses is walking and it's like it's so jittery that like it looks like someone's just flashing a camera over and over again. And I see this, and he uses it so sparingly. He doesn't rely on it a whole much, but when he does use it, like with the twins, where they're standing there and then all of a sudden they're smiling, it's incredibly unsettling. And I think even if you take out the expertly timed jump scares in here, there are some genuinely upsetting imagery in the first half of this movie and also in the further, where like we see like still photos almost of like a woman shooting her family. Like there's some indelible images in this movie, even without the jump scares and the sounds that are really like making you jumpy and jittery. And I love it.
And not to mention that like the kid that is like in all the marketing is in a coma from the 20-minute mark on. Like he is not. It's like the Hereditary. It's like Hereditary did this too, where like the kid is in all the marketing and then he's not really a character. I mean, he doesn't die, but again, like it subverts that with, oh, this kid is like not the creepy kid you think. He's just laying there. And it's just really, again, that really interesting like way of challenging your expectations and throwing you into the middle of something rather than having you like meet the family, get to know them, and then the scary stuff happens. I love when movies just trust you to get it and have all of the scary things happen while you get to know the family. And because I love getting to know these people in these moments and it getting to the horror faster. And I just love seeing those dynamics evolve in those scenarios. And I think it's really interesting that Juan plays with that here.
No, I like that it does definitely do a bit of over-explaining towards the end, for sure, as we get into
yeah. And like, it definitely, once it gets into like, and like it's so, it is a kind of like, once it gets into like the crazy stuff, that's when it loses me, which is such a bummer, because I'm like, oh, now we're getting into like alternate dimensions,
the Conjuring universe of it all.
Yeah, okay, now.
Yeah, even though like the kid is as much of a character as they can make him, for sure, but then also his presence is just so freaky. Like the idea of like this body in the other room, who is not a body, he's a kid who's still in there, and as a viewer he's still in there. But then I think all the time about that one scene where the brother is like, I don't like when he moves around at night. Like, and they don't show you that for just him telling the mother is so freaky. Like, it's so scary.
Well, that's what I love about the first act in particular. I think the first act is perfection. I do think it kind of loses its way a little bit as it starts to, as you said, over-explain a bit. But that first act is like the escalation here, where we realize that the family, there's something going on with the family. We don't really quite know what, because Renee says, I just hope that this house is like a new start. And so I'm like, you're sitting here going, okay, what happened before? Is there some kind of like drama between the two of them? What were they having family problems? What is it that like she wants this new house to be a new start? And she gets there and she's unpacking and the books fall over and she's blaming it on the kids. And then, you hear the rattling noises upstairs. She's hearing the things on the baby monitor. The kids going upstairs and falling off the like it is like this slow escalation of things that could be kind of normal, moving into new home jitters, someone knocks over things and don't want to take blame for it. Weird noises in the house, you're getting used to it. There's all these little things, but there's an underpresence of like dread that just churns right below the scene, even before we get into some of the more spooky things. And I don't know. I love that, as you said, I think, Mary Beth, that we're getting to know these characters while the horror is happening. And we don't usually see that. It's normally like a grace period and they ease you into it and then weird things start to happen. But no, right away, there's something wrong with this family. And it's horrifying. And I love that so much.
And I like that they give us some time before the Lin Shaye of it all comes in. And I do love the Lin Shaye of it all in this movie. She's a queen. I love her. But it helps, I think, make the family feel... Again, it's got like that poltergeist vibe of like letting us sit with the family and then bringing in like this really bombastic character that like is going to command a lot more attention, I feel like. I know Lin Shaye is not as bombastic as our girl Tangina, but she has like she's giving those vibes along with her kooky assistants. Like when they show up and they're able to, and then they start kind of over explaining and the spooky really starts happening. I still love that though. Like I definitely agree. The tone really shifts into like, what is happening now? Like now
it gets a little campy.
Oh, 1,000,000%. And I do think that James Wan does lean into camp in his movies a little bit, especially like with his like creature design. I do love that about his work that he and like talk about camp at the very end with the demon in the further. I mean, come the fuck on. Like
I love that scene. I love it. It's so good.
I think Wan leans into camp sometimes in a really fascinating way, and I kind of love that about. And I think he does that more with his later work when I think he's a little bit more comfortable. Because I feel like Insidious, he's like starting to hit that balance of like, what can I... Dead Silence was too camp. So like, what is the balance of camp
What can I get away with?
Maybe he doesn't even think it is camp, but anyway.
I think about that a lot with the very split reaction to Malignant, a movie that I love. I love
Same
that.
here. It was one of my favorite movies of that year.
Same. I'm obsessed with it. I'm generally like... I feel
Wait,
like
that's actually... just to reveal, I am wearing my Malignant booty shorts.
Oh, behind the scenes. I love this. Incredible.
Super Yaki made Thinking About Malignant 2021 booty shorts. And I was like, wait, I'm wearing my Malignant booty shorts. I have to show them off.
It's the perfect occasion. And
it is.
Like, the colors in this movie too, like the way that like it gets so teal and red. Also, I think that's why I wasn't totally like, oh, Malignant, what the heck? Like, this is so weird. Like, I'm like, oh no, this is like kind of just like an extension of the campier portions of Insidious. And like, if you just looked at the Conjuring movies, you might not think that that's part of his repertoire, but it is. And it's very fun. Like, I love it. It's so good.
It is. I think it's an underrated part of James Wan's filmography that people don't talk about as much is like how he does like never takes himself too seriously. I think he's always ready to be a little bit silly or a little bit like ready to lean into the just like utterly ridiculous, and I love that. I mean,
Billy, the puppet on a tricycle in a movie in which there is reverse bear traps. I mean, he is from the start inserted these little kind of moments that are a little hyper real, surreal, a little bit into that kind of camp from the very beginning. He is doing that. And I do think that a lot of people, I think that is one of the big divides about Malignant, because I introduced my brother to it a couple weeks ago and he hated the movie. And I'm just like, how can you hate this movie?
Of course he
well, of course. I mean, it's my brother. But the camp in that movie is so great. But I did want to go back to something you said, Mary Beth. You were talking about the kind of poltergeist. This is basically a remake of Poltergeist in a way.
Yeah.
Family moves into a house. Creepy things start to happen. Child goes missing. In this case, his body is there, but his mind is not. The father is unbelieving and is like sort of just kind of humoring his wife's weirdness about like trying to get a priest involved. There's a demonic world where the living shouldn't be. It's called The Further here. There's a kooky old psychic / medium that in this case is using a fucking gas mask extension to communicate what she is seeing. Parent goes into the ghost world to save their kid. Like this is basically the plot of Poltergeist, and yet it feels fresh because every single time you think you know where it's kind of going, it takes a jagged turn. But it is on paper, it is basically Poltergeist.
That was something that didn't really hit me until I rewatched it, like, not this last rewatch, but the prior one. I was like, oh, the Tobe Hooper of it all? Like,
yeah.
Right, the Tobe Hooper, Steven Spielberg of it all? Like, except it's all just combined in James Wan? Like, it's so interesting.
Mm-hmm. It is. Yeah. And, like, it doesn't try to... I love that it doesn't try to hit that, like, American family ideal at all. Immediately, there already is trouble in the family. And I think... This movie to me, also like the couple felt so real to me for like, and now that like they're bigger stars now, but like they really felt like a real couple because they had issues off the bat. maybe this is because I also like came from a house where a lot of fighting. I was like, I like movies where the parents are automatically like, not like there's a little bit of something going on. We're not trying to make the perfect, beautiful American family. And I like how like lived in and real it all feels until, you know, it becomes more of a Lin Shaye ghost story. But still, like the stakes feel higher, you know? They sell the stakes really well with the family.
Yeah.
And I just fucking love Lin Shaye. I just love her in these movies. I think she's so good. Iconic character with her scarves and kind of looking like the Long Island Medium with less hairspray. And I just love that for her.
What I do also love is we talked a little bit about James Wan's use of color. And in this movie, I think the color is so fascinating because we start with like a black and white photos of houses, and it leans into black and white shot of Rose Byrne's character that kind of color fades in. And she's wearing a little bit more colorful things, but as the movie goes on, it becomes more muted. But then talking about Lin Shaye, the moment that we open the door and Lin Shaye is there and she is, our first introduction to her is basically her giggle. She's laughing. Oh, this is so funny. And there's brightness to it. And all of a sudden the color is back. And it's almost like she is bringing with her like a ray of hope. And I just love the way the color informs what's happening. And then it gets dark again. And then the colors drain out. We're in the further and we use the red light for his. It's just the way color lights this movie tells so much and really puts you in a mood. And I never really realized that until this last watch, just how perfect the color is in this film.
Totally. And like the way in which it's not, I think it would be easy to look at the way the color's handled in this movie and think about it in like, oh, this is like the stereotypical like early aughts, you know, grim
early
dark
aughts, yep.
palette. But I kind of think that you're totally right. There's something more interesting going on than that, with especially with the use of red and the spots of color that do occur like in the movie. It's just interesting.
Because it's not the usual like grimy. It's like it looks like something sucked the soul out of it. It's not just like a lens, but it definitely feels like the color, like something has taken the color out of it, which I think is what differentiates it from that like kind of gray, grimy, bluish green that we were used to in that era. And again, I do think Juan maybe is playing with that a little bit, but I don't know. It is really cool how he uses that. And again, like you said, it could be, you could say it's stereotypical, but it's very purposeful in how it's used. And it's so effective that it's like, it's simple. But again, Juan is using these simple techniques to their most effective like height, which is really cool to see someone use these tools so expertly.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Just a fucking neat movie.
It is really neat. And we had talked with actually the cinematographer of this movie on this podcast. And so listeners, go listen to our interview with John Leonetti if you want to hear some little bit of background information about his movies. But I think he also should be given credit for the way in which we look at horror movies from this time period, because like he got involved with Juan for Dead Silence, and he did Dead Silence, Death Sentence, and then Insidious and The Conjuring. So like this is a man who established the way that we look at James Wan's films and gave his films a character that I think continued even when they didn't end up working together later on. But you can kind of see the stylistic choices being established like in Dead Silence, and then continuing up through Insidious and The Conjuring and Insidious Chapter 2. And I think that's where their paths kind of diverged a bit. But yeah, John Leonetti, what fantastic cinematography in such a small budget film, but it looks bigger just because of the way the camera captures things, I think.
Totally. What a G.
And
it really is.
I do want to just touch very quickly on our incredible ending where once again, we're inverted. We're no longer just doing the woman going after the kid. The dad now has to address his trauma and his inheritance to his son, and we get that flip again that we don't usually see in horror. And he has to go into the further, and our scary demon pal, who has been this like looming presence the whole movie in corners,
Darth Maul,
Darth Maul looking motherfucker. He walks through the door. And this motherfucker is sharpening his claws, listening to Tiny Tim's Tiptoe Through the Tulips. And when I tell you that I let out the most nervous giggle when I first saw this, of like, what the fuck am I supposed to feel right now? Incredible reveal. Discuss. I just want to hear your reactions. I know there are mixed reactions to this. genius to me. Genius. Camp, beautiful, mwah, chef's kiss.
Like, if you can come with the film on the turn to camp, it is so genius. I completely agree. I love that turn. I love the weird I think that the switch from, you know, we're in the real world, haunted house, you know, haunted kid, to still photos with like these kind of slightly exaggerated costumes, like these exaggerated situations, like the weird kid that, you know, like is running around. Like, if you can follow that thread and say, okay, I'm with you here, you will enjoy that, because I've watched this movie with people who aren't on board for that through taste or whatever, and it doesn't land. And I get it, but it lands for me. Yeah,
it sure does.
It lands for me too, for a number of reasons. One, I think I love when we see him kind of sharpening his claws. It gives me like a Nightmare on Elm Street vibe, because we have like Freddy in the very beginning, sharp in the very first opening scene of Nightmare on Elm Street. He is sharpening his claws, and you can't look at a person with the clawed hand in a dream-ish area because it's astral projection. It's like, so like we kind of get this sort of dreamy kind of logic to it. It feels very Nightmare on Elm Street. And so I was on board with that. I also started thinking, we talked a little bit about the kind of the physicality and the solidity of like the ghosts. And this is a character, what I think I really enjoy about this is, even if we don't get a whole lot of backstory for the ghosts, you can see their personality. And we have this character that has cat eyes, and you think about the way in which he is playing with his victims. It is like a cat. Like, there is a definite like cat feel to him, where he is just like tormenting poor Dalton and tormenting the family. And he's getting off on this kind of like just playing with them and poking them and letting them, you know, drag themselves and then pulling them back. Like, I think this reveal is really fantastic for me, but I can understand. I don't think I enjoyed it when I first saw it. I remember particularly liking the first act, enjoying some of the twists in the second act, and then sort of losing myself as we get into the further. But the more and more I watch it, the more and more I'm like, this is A+ storytelling for me. I do love that reveal at the end. What about you, Mary Beth?
I'm obsessed. I love it.
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous and like, what? But I liked it when I first saw it, but as I've like even more appreciation, it's like, it's just so, it's the extreme of anything you would have expected. And it's like so surprising, because you're like, oh, I thought like this is such a tonal shift, but somehow it fits again, because, and I didn't appreciate this when I was younger, is like, it does kind of, it doesn't really just go right there. It gives you like those photos and setting the further up as this weird like place and weird kind of like uncanny reality, and you see these weird things, and it makes sense that it culminates in like the weirdest thing possible is tormenting your kid. And it's like, it's just so creepy and so silly. The silliness comes back around to scary, you know what I mean? Like when it's so silly, you're like, it's not silly anymore, it's actually just incredibly unnerving. And that's what this is every time. It makes me like, ugh. It's just, again, like I said at the beginning, the vibes in this movie are rancid on purpose, and it's incredible how rancid they make the movie feel in terms of just like on edge and nervous about whatever is going to happen next. Like, they never let you relax, I feel like, watching this movie.
Totally.
The other thing I appreciate about them going into the further is as a kid watching Poltergeist, I always wanted to know, what does the other side look like? Because we don't see it. All we see is the mom coming back covered in afterbirth. I don't really know exactly what, but like, you're just like, what does that side look like? And here it's like, okay, we're not gonna just tease you. We're gonna show you what the further is. And some of it does feel a little like they were running into budget limitations, like how he's walking through and it's just pitch black. Like, it's creepy, it's effective, but it's also like, okay, maybe that $1.5 million budget could have been a little higher for some of the way
what
that
can you do?
It goes through. But I still think it's really effective. And as someone that, again, grew up watching Poltergeist over and over again, I was happy that we're going to show you what this other kind of creepy world is that the kid has been kidnapped to. Like, I appreciate that.
The like actual, I agree with you with the darkness, but then I think about that one scene where I think it's top down and you see him and the kid and it's just the hands around them.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's just evocative. I like that kind of shit of like, especially as somebody who loves history, like thinking about the sheer quantity of ghosts around at any given time is just like, that's the freakiest part to me. It's like you would never be anywhere without the dead if you were in the further, theoretically, right? Like,
yeah.
And
then it wouldn't be a James Wan movie if we didn't have, or a Leigh Whannell movie for that matter, if we didn't have like a last minute twist. And so what do you think about the way this movie ends, with the bride, the funeral? I don't know I can't remember what she is possessing.
The bride in black. Is that what they call it?
The bride in black.
Bride in black.
Yeah, I think so. I think they call her, they reference her as like a crone, but then she's wearing this bridal outfit. So it's like you've the merging of like the crone and the bride, like the most horrifying thing you can imagine. Like
a scary old lady.
My
and then
God.
it just gets worse in two. But
it's played by a man.
Wow, that's camp. That's camp right there.
It is, but it's also
it's camp until you get to two, and it's like
it's truly
two complicates things a little too much in terms of like the man in a dress trope. Like it's just a little, it gets a little icky. But at the end of this movie, to me, I'm curious because we kill off Lin Shaye.
Yeah, and I think I was so shocked by that too. And I was shocked, and this was like prime time when I was like, fuck yeah, sequels. You know what I mean? Like there was a time in my life where I was like always stoked for like more of a story and more of a franchise. Not that way anymore. But I was bummed as fuck about Elise. But I also didn't have the attachment to Lin Shaye that I have now. So I was like a little bit like, oh, fuck yeah. Okay, cool. Like everything's just crazy as shit. Like we're just fucking with things again. And I was so into just how it was shifting everything and how I was also a little bit of an edgelord at this time. And I loved a good like nihilistic, like kill the good, like the hero, like the woman who saved everybody, like killing her. I kind of loved that a little bit. A lot. And kind of loved having it be like, yeah, no, like this is not the beautiful, happy ending. And it's one of those endings I could see people are frustrated by, but when I was younger, when I first saw this, now it's a little bit like, okay. But to me, when I was younger, I was super into it. I thought it was cool.
I think if you see it as James Wan and Leigh Whannell, like, I mean, everyone involved in this story reacting to Poltergeist, specifically to the happy ending in Poltergeist, I think it makes a lot of sense. I don't know if that was, like, in the text, but in my reading, I see it as, like, a reaction to that ending of that movie specifically. I am still a little bit of an edgelord, so I don't mind the ending. I think it's kind of fun. I do think it's a little bit too like, whoa, what if everyone just died? You know?
Yeah,
like, there's a bit of that.
It's mostly the like, oh, he's possessed. I still love it. Elise dies, unless how much I love her. But it's just like I guess it's hard to watch it now because it's like it feels hokey now because I feel like everyone has the cop out. But I'm trying to remember if like that era. No, I feel like that was still a thing in a lot of movies, like where you'd have like the hokey, like it's still the ghost. Like I think that to me, I was like, oh, that was the one trope I think it fell into at the end where I was like, oh, okay,
this is fine.
This is fine. I'm not mad about it, but it's like it could have, but hey,
I still like it, and the reason why I like it is because we have like I feel like it's. I don't think I enjoyed it when I first saw that, but again, it's one of those things where the more I see the movie, the more I appreciate what it's doing. And so I love that we get like this trail of photographs from when he's a young kid as the woman is getting closer and closer and closer, right? And so then I start thinking about it with this, where it's like the real villain isn't the red-faced demon. It is this bride that kind of, I feel, contrived this whole situation just to get into his body. And so looking at it that way, where it's like we have the kid is going, because the very first image of the movie, the very first scary part of the movie is the old woman standing with a candle in the frame. And so it is like she's lingering over this and she's like, I'm going to get you, and this is how it's going to work.
True.
And so, and that's not something that, this is something that after watching it, I've seen this movie multiple times. And so that's something that like I've started to like appreciate more about it, is that I do think that she was the mastermind behind all of this to get into, for whatever reason, I don't really know why, but to get into his body was like her whole goal this entire time. And this movie was basically just a long con to do that. And so I appreciate the ending from that perspective, but that's just me possibly reading way too much into the movie.
No, but I do agree with that. I think there is something really scary to that thought of like something wants you so badly that it will haunt you forever and like ruin your family. Like that's so that is fucked.
I mean, it's giving Hereditary if that's your read of the movie.
Yeah.
You know, like I like that more in your read of that. You know, whether that's like the intent or not. I think that's totally plausible, and that makes me like enjoy it more. I also I like it in the context of like retroactively looking at like the Conjuring movies as well, which like I am not the biggest fan of because of the Warrens of it all. I think looking at this, having it have a really like kind of downer, like darker ending is fun in context.
Yeah. Jesus can't save you, baby.
Not today.
That's what I loved about it on this watch when I was, because if you're watching this like in a post-Conjuring world where it's like, we have gone back into this era of, the Catholic priest or Christianity is going to be the savior for this. I love that we get, the first thing that we do see with this is Renee gets her friend who's a priest, but we don't use him. We use this lady who we don't really know what her story is. She just seems to be like a medium. She doesn't seem to be religious. She seems very like hippie. Like it feels like we have that, and then we have her, Specs and Tucker, and it's very like paranormal investigator type stuff going on, but it's not religious. And I do appreciate that it is not Christianity that saves the day in this case. It is someone that doesn't seem to be related to religion at all.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And
then we go to have the Warrens. So
I like when I was first watching it, I remember, and I know that like maybe as a more seasoned viewer, it's not as refreshing, but I remember being excited that it was like someone's auntie who is coming in, like Lin Shaye truly does just look like your neighbor who is like going to tell you about crystals, like in the best way possible.
And I think that's exactly what she's like too, which I love. Like she really is just like that nice neighbor that like bakes you cookies and sometimes might give you weed, and like you love talking to her, but sometimes you don't want to talk to her because she talks for too long.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah,
there's a lot of stories to tell.
And like you said, like it's very like an older woman in a really cool role in horror. Like she isn't. Yeah, I love that.
Well, I was thinking about, because this came out in 2010, and then we have You're Next coming out like in 2011 that revitalized Barbara Crampton's career too. So we have like these two people who had their start in horror, and then like finding a new audience in the aughts because of people that were in love with them. Speaking of which, we didn't talk about Barbara Hershey playing Lorraine.
Barbara Hershey.
And she was
oh my God.
the Entity. She was in The Entity. Like, so what's smart casting there too, to bring a woman that was in one of the most fucked up ghost stories of like the 80s is now back to be in this movie as the mom of it all. And I love that.
That movie's so fucked up.
Have you seen The Entity, Emmett?
I have not seen The Entity. I've seen like the very beginning of it, but I have not finished it. I think I was in the middle of something, but now I want to see it.
It's good.
Rough.
It's hard to watch. It's a rough watch.
Yeah.
It's
all
rough,
right, gotcha.
but it's good. It's just like, just be prepared for that.
We both watched it for the first time for the podcast, like right when the podcast was starting 4 years ago, and that was the first time I'd ever seen it. And it's a rough film, but it's really interesting, I think.
I'm down. I will check it out. I'm always down for a tough sit, to be honest.
Hell yeah. Love that. All right. Well, do we want to wrap up and give us our rating out of 5 for Insidious?
Yes.
Sure.
All right, Terry, you're first. How many tiptoes through the tulips do you give?
Tiptoe through the tulips.
With me. That guy was in a horror movie. Tiny Tim was in a horror movie.
He was. Blood Harvest.
Yeah, what a weird movie. Anyway.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. When I logged this,
my bad.
When I logged this on Letterboxd this last time, I realized that I'd given it a 4, and I think I've kept it at a 4 for so long. But I'm gonna be perfectly honest. Every time I watch this, I love it a little bit more. I do think that in terms of telling an interesting ghost story that keeps surprising at every single turn, still manages to make me jump. Maybe not scream and make my cat run away from me, but still jump. I'm gonna bump it up a half a star because I don't think it is a perfect film, but I do think it is as close to it as I think it could be. So I'm giving it 4.5 tiptoes through the tulips, just going round and round in circles on those tulips. But what about you, Mary Beth?
This will be a 4 tiptoes through the tulips for me. I want to bump it up, but I'm gonna keep it at a 4. I still love this movie though. I mean, this is like one of the first movies that made me have such a physical reaction to it. I think it's so smart. I think the third act doesn't fall apart. It's not the right word for me, but just like it becomes a little bit more like over the top in a way that I both appreciate, and also like it's not always my favorite, but I still love it. So this is a 4 for me. This movie is just so fucking scary. It marks such an era for horror. It's James Wan really showing more of what he can do outside of just Saw. I mean, this man launched so many subgenres of contemporary horror. Like, what the hell? Like, the influence of James Wan is so incredible. But yeah, it's a 4. And Emmett, you have the final word. How many tiptoes through the tulips do you give Insidious?
So this one's tough because I don't like rating things. But I genuinely think that it's probably a 4 tiptoes for me. If I had to be particular about it, I tend to reserve 5-star films for ones that I will, love and rewatch. Like no matter what, in any mood. That's just movies that I think about all the time. And I love this movie. It obviously scarred me for life, but I don't find myself going back to it as a movie that I love, even though I do think technically it is like an amazing movie. I think that he did like really incredible things for the genre with this one, like you mentioned. But I do think that like the movie does have a bit of a weird jump or a lag towards the end that brings it down a little bit, but it's like a high 4. It's a real high 4 for me.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Love that. Well, thank you so much, Emmett, for joining us and bringing Insidious. I never thought we'd be covering this movie, so I'm so happy that you brought it. Where can our listeners find you? And the floor is yours. What do you have to plug that you can share?
So you can find me on most forms of social media at _Emnays, EMNAYS. My Twitter is still up there as a memoriam to what once was, but I'm on Blue Sky and Instagram too under those handles. And my website is just myname.com, emmettnahil.com. And you can find Let Me Out, which is coming out October 3rd at Simon Schuster's website, at the Oni Press website, and the pre-order is on any number of my social media channels. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to plug.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
All right. Well, listeners, you've heard from us, but we want to hear from you. What was your experience with Insidious? You can let us know by sending us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com, or you can reach out to us on Twitter. I am at MBMcAndrews.
And I'm at Gaily Dreadful.
And of course, follow the podcast on Twitter at Scarred Podcast. You can also follow us on Instagram and on Blue Sky at Scarred for Life Podcast.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe. And if you want to help support us, we do have a Patreon.
Thank you to Eric Power for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Please stay safe out there, but most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.